when you're somebody that people think is good at something in art, people give you an outsized amount of like adulation for that. It's like the guy who drove the bus on this tour was much better at driving a bus than I am at music, but nobody claps.
Again, I'm Adam, and this is about you and your journey in music and how you got to where you are now. And we'll talk about the album coming out here in a couple weeks or week and a half or so.
Yeah.
Sweet. First off, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Newark, New Jersey,
Okay.
and I lived there until I was 11 years old, and then I finished growing up in Georgia. So
Oh
a
wow.
little bit of
So
both of those.
yeah, from Newark to then moved to Georgia. What was it like? I mean, early on living in New York, what was that like?
So Newark is in the town, the county that I lived in, the suburbs of New York City, like maybe 15 miles from the city. And so it was pretty striking to move to the South,
Yeah.
having lived up there, and uh, definitely an interesting, kind of change of pace. I wore a puffy Rangers starter jacket every day
Nice.
when I first moved down there, and eventually a teacher decided that it made her warm that I was wearing a winter coat all year, and so yeah, so I did that for a long time. It was an adjustment for sure. Getting
Definitely.
used. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, it's all good.
Mm.
Yeah, that's that. I was just based off of who knows if the internet's right. We're about the same age, and I remember starter jackets and like Starter was such a big company back in like the '90s.
Yep, it was a big deal, that puffy coat. My wife
Yeah.
my wife and I we met when we were in the seventh grade. So like her first memories of me are me in this puffy jacket,
No
which is
way. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
I mean
so amazing.
we didn't start to date until we were adults, but we met as little kids, and so
But
yeah,
still, that's cool. That's
yeah,
really, really cool.
her first picture of me is me in this red, white, and blue New York Rangers puffy starter jacket. So
How funny. What took you to Georgia? Was that your family, your parents' job or something? Was that what moved you down there?
yeah, my mom and my stepdad were going to school, so we moved for them to go to school.
Oh, nice. Okay. And what about music? How did you get into music?
Well, I guess I've kind of always made music. I sang a lot as a kid, and I was always like in the choir and in chorus at school, and I always wrote poems and things like that. And then one of my friends got an acoustic guitar when we were like 12 or so, 12 or 13, and we would occasionally write a song, but it wasn't like a thing we did all the time. And then I just kind of kept writing, and as I got older, we started a band. But it was just kind of one of the things I did, like you do all kinds of stuff when you're a kid. And um, so growing up, it certainly wasn't like the, organizing centerpiece of my life or anything. It was just one of the things that I did. And then I went to college to play baseball. And then after I was done doing that, I needed, kind of an organizing principle, something at the center of my life. And so I really kind of took all the energy that I was putting into sports and I put it into music. And so I think that's kind of the start of the whole thing. I went to NYU after that, and joined a songwriting circle, and I met a
Oh,
bunch of
wow.
great writers, and they really influenced me, and, kind of gave me the motivation, and the notion that I could be a songwriter. Like I had never really considered it before that.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like if you went to college for baseball, that must have been pretty dominating in your life. I mean, even through high school, I'd imagine, right? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
playing at that level.
Yeah. I mean, it takes all of your energy, and I mean, I think kind of if you want to be very good at anything, it sort of takes that. What if you're, unless you are incredibly lucky, because whatever you do, if it's something that you're trying to be, exceptional at, there's other, like if you're especially gifted to begin with, let's say, as you move along, eventually you're going to find people who are as good or better than you naturally. So then it's just about, who's more willing to keep digging the hole.
Mhm.
And so I think sports were kind of a good lesson for business. Honestly, it's like, really, obviously, I'm a musician, but I own a record label, and I would say, like, being an independent, like a truly independent artist, that really play, that kind of work ethic and nonstop hustle was definitely a distinguishing factor between me and other people that I came up with. Certainly, like, in college, I wasn't the best songwriter, I wasn't the best singer, I wasn't like the best guitar player or the coolest or the best looking or the best performer. There was no superlative that you would have given me ahead of, people that were around me. But I was just willing to keep going when everybody else would stop. Over time, that kind of was the thing that brought me forward, is that when the people who were better than me who were like, oh man, I need health insurance, or I need to make, know that I'm gonna be able to pay my rent next month. I was willing to not have health insurance, not be able to make my rent. And it's an absurd proposition, obviously, as an artist, if you're not born with money, which I was certainly not,
Mhm.
that you have to kind of make those choices. But that's what was presented to me. It's either keep going and outlast everyone else, or starve or drown or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of kept at it. And so yeah, that's definitely something that held over from sports, because I was never the best at anything. I just kind of like showed up first and was there last, and always did the most. And so that allowed me to keep going much farther than many people who were considerably more gifted than I was.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've interviewed over, almost 1,400 artists doing this, and I was in radio and everything before that. It's like a lot of people, because at the end, I'm going to ask you if you have any advice, but it's a lot of people say, just keep going, right? If you just continue to move forward, hopefully something will end up landing, and all the people that were kind of on your level will start, you know, kind of tapering off as these things arise, like money or health insurance, all these things. It's like, not, it sounds like you didn't really have like a plan B when you got to that level.
No, no, I did not. And it's funny, because I would say that now I always recommend to people who are starting, like, learn to do something else, um, so that, like, if you get hungry, you can do something else. And but I didn't learn to do anything else. I went to college and majored in anthropology, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's the study of how to make coffee when you graduate. It's like barista studies mostly. You meet a lot of people working at the coffee shops and flower shops of America who
Okay.
majored in anthropology. But I mean, it's something that you need a doctorate degree to even try to make a living with. And
Mhm.
so I didn't learn anything in school, except for how to make music. I mean, the trade that I learned was this. And there were definitely a few years there where I wish I wished I knew how to do something else, because it was pretty grim for a while. But you
But
know
it all worked out.
yes, so far we're still here. I haven't had to get a truck driver's license yet.
Sure, sure. Were you, when you went to NYU, it sounds like you didn't start at NYU playing baseball, but when you went
Yeah.
there, did you go to do songwriting, or had you finished your anthropology degree at the other college and moved
No,
over,
so
or
no, so I went to Rutgers for 2 years to play baseball, and then
okay.
I left Rutgers when I was done playing baseball to go to NYU. And but no, I didn't major in songwriting. I don't really know a lot of people who are like good songwriters, like good, like real professional songwriters that did that.
Uh-huh.
Because I like it's hard. It would be hard to teach. I mean, I think it still is. I think they're trying to crack that code at a lot of universities that have songwriting majors. It's like,
Mhm.
because it's largely about independent study in the end. No one's going to craft your voice for you. I think people can give you tips, and you can learn about song form and music theory and all stuff that I certainly did learn about in school. But no, I didn't major in songwriting or music. I took music theory and harmony and counterpoint, and vocal lessons and guitar lessons and piano lessons. And I definitely learned about music. But I don't. I definitely don't recommend to anyone that they go to college and major in songwriting. It's you know
Yeah,
That's a tough one to teach at in the university.
for sure. Yeah, it's not like a doctor or something where they're like, okay, this is what you need to do, and then you go perform. And it's like they can't write a code for this is how you write the perfect song, and when you leave here, you're gonna have 6 hits and be successful.
Well, it's also like you think about like the idea that like so you can learn about song form, right? And you're
Mhm,
like, okay, like the most traditional song form is maybe like A B C, something like that, verse chorus bridge chorus, something like that,
mhm.
like that kind of a thing, like maybe. And so you could
Right.
teach kids every kind of like conventional song form, but sometimes people write a song that's 55 seconds long and it's basically just one long chorus, and that becomes a hit. Like you don't know, like you can't,
Yeah.
it's like you can't predict also like what trends are going to be in production. Like as a for instance, there are years where everything is programming piano songs, and then there's right now they are not. So
Mhm.
it's like if you learn to write piano ballads, and that's all you learn to do, and you make that your central focus, then the years that no one is cutting piano ballads, what are you going to do then?
Right.
So I think it's like about a broad understanding of music, and the writing pop songs and writing, I mean, I use pop as a very broad term, but
Sure.
writing like songs that are for people to consume. It's like, yeah, it's hard to teach that to kids in school. I mean, and I say the same thing when I go to like universities to guest lecture. I'm like, I don't know what they're going to teach you about songwriting here. Like you better be, because the most important thing if you want to be a songwriter is like you have to learn a ton of songs. Like that's definitely, um, like we were talking about this the other day, like the different chord progressions that we use in places where we're like, I wonder where it was the first place that I ever played whatever, like
Mhm.
2-1-5 or something, which is like not the most common thing in popular music, but I kind of do it a good amount in pre-choruses. We were like noticing this, and it's like, where did I learn that? Like, where did that come from? It's like I must have played it somewhere before I started doing it all the time. And
Right.
so but that's like I learned, you know, I can't even imagine, I can't fathom how many songs, and I'm still learning songs all the
Mhm.
time because I'm curious. It's like my brother is it has a very mechanical mind. He works in film, and he works as a cameraman. He's in that union, and he's in the union of film electricians. So he's like a very mechanical thinker. And when he
Mhm.
was a kid, my brother would take apart stuff. Like he took apart the VCR when I was a kid, and then he put it back together, and that's how he learned how it worked. He took apart the toaster, and then he put it back together, and then he understood how it worked. And I think that songs are kind of like that. It's like, you dissect other people's songs and you learn, and that's a big thing. And so definitely, like when I went to NYU, I joined a songwriting circle, and in that songwriting circle we workshopped songs all the time. Someone would come with a new song, and we learned the language of music criticism, like how to give constructive criticism and how to accept constructive criticism. And that was perhaps the most valuable thing that
Mhm.
I learned about music, like probably throughout my life, is how to uh, share my ideas with others and then accept notes. Like
Yeah.
because then you're working with the brain power of multiple people. It's like you can create a brain trust. You're not just using your own energies. Other people can share their ideas with you, whether it's someone else who's co-writing a song with you or just a friend who's giving notes as you write.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah,
probably
there's
that was the most valuable part of my education.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, there's something about being vulnerable, like, and not having someone say, "Oh, you should do it this way," and then taking it all way too personally and being like, "Oh no, this is it's this way," and then you never know what would have happened if you would have taken the
Well,
suggestion.
I think removing like the art is something that I make, and while
Uh-huh.
it comes from inside of me, it is not me. It is not a part of me. And so if someone is uh finding fault in some part of it, they are not finding fault in me. it's not like I am deficient in some way because the bridge of this song has a chord that they find off-putting, like, or they think that one of the lyrics is like the rhyme could be more refined or something. That's not. I think in the beginning you're like, this is my art and it's who I am and it's everything. And it's like, well, the art is an expression of stuff that's inside of you. Sure, sure, sure. But
Mhm.
if you're gonna make art, like if you're a career artist, you're gonna make music your whole life. I think you have to learn to take your self-worth out of there, because in addition to the fact that people are going to have notes and ideas, the people that you collaborate with are going to have those. You're also going to be like, criticism is a part of the business. Like, you're going to have people whose jobs it is to write critique of the things you create, and you can't put your self-worth in there, otherwise it'll eat you alive.
Mhm, mhm. That makes a lot of sense for sure. With you said the people that were in you're going to school with at NYU were, a support system and kind of help validate what you are doing as a songwriter. Like, was there a moment, like, or what kind of continued at that? Like, once you had finished school, were you playing around New York? And was there like a moment that kind of boosted you to the next level, or was it just kind of a gradual thing?
Yeah, mine isn't like, and then this happened and then everything changed. I didn't have one of those kind of moments. It just kind of was like a long, long series of hard work and slowly growing an audience. I had always been playing out. Like in college, my band got very popular in New York, so that was, being in a popular band in New York feels a lot like being famous,
Mhm.
because it's like, a giant city and people know you on the street, and you feel like that's pretty, a pretty profound experience as a kid who no one had been paying attention to a few months before. Um, so that happened, and then that kind of tapered off, and I was on the road a lot after college, and then in with I guess 2 years after I graduated from college, and I had been playing out in New York, I had been touring a bunch, and then I was in sort of the first class of people who broke on the internet, which is
Oh, okay.
kind of dating me a little bit, but
Okay,
before,
we're the
like,
same age-ish
yeah,
from
yeah,
what I
but like
said.
before social media had a name, I got really, really popular on the internet, and so that was a really, an interesting thing, because I had been fostering this online community, um, at a time when people weren't really doing that, and certainly not like at the majors. Like the big players in the industry were not leaning into the internet yet,
Mhm.
and so I had like one of the first really big viral hits on the internet. And that just kind of launched the whole thing. And then, I hadn't been a solo artist. Like I said, I was in a band, but I had this little, solo, little, and nominally I had a solo project, but it was just a few recordings I'd put out, and, some people I was talking to online, but then it just kind of grew and snowballed. And so within a few years of graduating, I was all in on the solo project. And I was like, at that point, the most popular unsigned artist in the world. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a pretty big swing from nobody was listening to my music. And I was like, driving around with my friends in a van playing for like three people in Richmond, and then driving and playing for four people in Virginia Beach, and eight people in Savannah, and 13 people in Mobile, and so on and so on. Um, so I had been out doing that, and then it just kind of like went bananas, like, and that's really where, like, my actual career began, I guess.
Okay. And what platform was that on? Was it like a MySpace
That
thing
was
or
MySpace, yeah. And then
okay.
I had a friend, my friend Jake was one of the first interns at TuneCore, which is a
Oh, yeah.
distributor, independent distributor. And he was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, we can put your music on iTunes if you want." And I was like, "Oh yeah." We were like, immediately once it started working online and people started, caring about it, we were like, "Oh wow, how do we turn this into a job? Like, it's cool
Mhm.
that all these people are listening, but like I'm making, I'm paying $400 a month to like live with a bunch of roommates in Harlem, and like I need to pay that rent." I was like
Right, right.
teaching guitar lessons, I think, at that point. So Jake said, "Let's put your music on iTunes." And so I was like, "Okay, sure." Like, I paid, whatever, I don't know, like $25 or something. And we, started putting my music on iTunes. And then it was like, I started selling digital tracks, like millions of them,
Oh,
then
wow.
a few years later, streaming came along, and I started to get you know billions of streams. So it's been a fascinating thing. Like, some of this stuff has just been like I was at exactly the right age, I was in exactly the right room. Like, I met one of the people who started Pandora, like, at a conference, and we just sat down, we had some beers, and like, I had never heard of it before, it was like brand new, and he was like, oh, and we were parting ways. He was like, oh, give me your CD, I'll put your music my thing that I made. So I was one of the first indie artists on there, and then I was like the first American independent artist to break in a meaningful way on Spotify in Europe. So I went from, like, exploratory touring over there to, like, headlining festivals, like being on the same stages as, like, Lana Del Rey and Imagine Dragons, and, like, playing for 50,000 people and stuff. So it definitely, the, being at there at the emergence of social media, and the both the sale of digital tracks on the internet and then streaming has really fostered my ability to do all of this. And it's like really brought, now obviously it's like I tour all over the world and all of
Right.
that stuff, and I have been for a very long time. And that really all came out of us learning to navigate, how do we turn a digital fan base into like actual human beings in the world.
And not a lot of artists can do that, make that transition, especially now with streaming and Spotify. Like, you might get X million plays on a song and then try to play somewhere in the country and maybe no one will show up. They'll just know you as you have that one hit on TikTok or whatever. Like,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
be
and
able to
that's
translate that into ticket sales, that's huge.
really a fascinating thing that we watch right now. You see people get, million TikTok followers and millions of monthly listeners on Spotify, and they can't, rub together, two tickets in most cities in the world.
Right.
And because I mean, I think it's sort of like when you win one of the singing TV shows. It's like there a lot of the people that are consuming that are television fans. They're people who like the television show. And so while they might even vote for you to win, it's hard to convert those people into actual consumers of your music, because they were there to watch you on a TV show. They're not necessarily, ready to come into the world with you and go see you, when you're on your tour to play whatever clubs or theaters or whatever you're going to do.
Hmm.
And so it's not easy for anyone, I think, to navigate. It's like if you're on a I don't know, like if you're an actor and you're on a TV show, you might have millions of Instagram followers and TikTok followers, and people, you have a beloved and devoted audience, but you might not be able to get 10,000 people to listen to your new song because they care about you from being on that TV show, or they care about you from the movie you were in or whatever. And
Right.
so it's I think it's a thing that everybody has to navigate as they're trying to figure out, like, how do I build an audience, and then what does that audience mean, and how do I turn this into a living.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you're an independent artist now. You own the label that you're on, right?
Mhm.
And
To be fair, my
like,
wife runs it, so I mean, I only nominally participate in the
oh,
running of this
okay.
label. And like occasionally I go there and I give people a bunch of thumbs up, and maybe I move around some boxes or something. I'm like, well, I'm here, uh
That's
but
amazing that she does that. That's so cool.
yeah,
What
she became my manager. My wife worked in at television advertising.
mm,
She worked for a big TV network, and then she was at the beginnings of selling digital advertising, like on the internet. She was doing that um, many moons ago, and she was kind of like helping with my management. And then it got to the point where I was on the road all the time, and she basically had two full-time jobs because my career had gotten involved enough. There was always stuff for her to do, and so that was about 11 years ago that she transitioned out of her gig to manage me, and then she started taking on other management clients, and it just kind of it just grew from there. So now she does a bunch of stuff. She has uh me and two other management clients, and then we have a conventional label where we have a few artists signed, and then she does these marketing partnerships where artists come to her, and she does her and our team at the label, they do releases for people that like you hire us for a
Yeah.
given amount of time rather than like a record deal where the label owns your recordings. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's cool. I mean, and she's she's a force of nature, and it is a powerful woman in an industry that is like largely dominated by men. And
Mhm.
so, and now actually the whole team at the label is women. It's her and
Oh,
women. I
that's
mean,
amazing.
yeah, it's cool. I mean, and I don't know. That's not like it wasn't necessarily like an on purpose thing. It's just like we kept hiring the most qualified people, and the most qualified people happen to be women a bunch of times in a row. So
Yeah.
and so
Um,
yes, that's what she does.
that's cool. So, but when you're you have these numbers on even MySpace back then at being the most popular independent artist on the platform, did that were you getting the bigger players, like the bigger major labels at that time coming
Oh
towards
yeah.
you being like, "Oh,
Oh,
hey,
oh
like
yeah.
what you got going on here?"
Everybody, like all the majors tried to sign me, and I eventually did spend 1 year signed to a major. And I always say, for me, having that deal was like being in middle school because I knew what I needed to do, but I always had to ask someone for money or permission.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I it really, as an adult, it really didn't jive for me, and they just didn't add like a single dollar worth of value. And it did do one thing that it did definitely is it allowed me to shape my ideas about how I was going to do business. And so I only work with people who I feel like I can add value to, because like I went somewhere and people basically they kind I mean, I don't want to say I don't want to say it in a way that's wrong. It's like they didn't add any value and they gained a great deal. I feel like
Mm,
the most diplomatic way that I can say that. It's they didn't add anything and they were able to take a great deal from me. And I'm lucky, like, because I had a reversion of master's clause, so I was able to get my recordings back in the end. And
oh, that's huge.
and I had a limited amount of time that I had to be there. I was able to extricate myself when I realized that it was a bad situation. Like a lot of people, these companies, they own their lives. They own all the recordings that they've made forever, and never pay them a dime after in advance. And so I'm very lucky. And we I would have loved to find a meaningful partner that would have helped us grow the project. I mean, I love the music. I've invested my whole life into it. Of course,
Mhm.
what you want is for partners to come along that mean business and that care as much as you do. And I have been very lucky though that like we figured out a way. I always say like now we're indie with infrastructure. We in-house we have a publicist, we have a creative director who shapes the visuals, we have an assistant. There's always like a bunch of people around helping, so it's not just I'm not like I'm not doing this myself. And
Right.
that's I think when people imagine indie, they imagine that I'm taking every package to the post office, and that's not always the case. I Sometimes it is me. Sometimes I am bringing your merch to the post office, but not always. Obviously, there are other
Yeah,
people that work here. It takes a village to
for
to
sure. No,
to keep
yeah.
up with this middle-aged man. It takes a village to raise me.
Well, I want to talk to you, but I really want to talk to you about the new album because the story behind it seems, yeah, like it was been a lot, and it was definitely a hard time for you. But just real quick, because I saw on your Instagram that you got another platinum record for a drop in the ocean, and you have a double platinum record for, I think Sweden was the country. Like you came into the co-writer's house, and you're like, we got like I thought that was such a
Yeah.
rad video. Tell me about that song. Was that something that took off fairly quickly, or was that a song that ended up y- being more
You
of like a
know,
slow burn, or like what?
that one is kind of like the knock on wood, it is the gift that keeps on giving.
Okay.
Every year it seems like, how could this possibly keep growing? And it just does. It just keeps going and going and going. And so I wrote that song with Zach Berkman, who used to be my roommate, one of my best friends. He's the officiant in my wedding. You know, he was like
Oh, rad.
yeah, he's my minister.
The
Zach,
Reverend. Yeah, I
yeah,
did that for my friend's wedding too, and my brother-in-law's. It's funny.
the right Reverend Zach Berkman. And so
Yeah.
yeah, so Zach is, like my brother. And so we wrote that song together a long time ago. And honestly, so the process of getting an indie record certified is like insanely difficult. We had no idea. It's like it's hard to sell the records, obviously, but like we had done that, you know, many years ago. But the certification process is very involved. And like if you're on a major, they have a direct pipeline. It's very easy. They have it's like it's straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it was quite a journey. So I always say this, like my wife, Blair, like I said, who runs everything. Blair had to do way more work to get that platinum record than I did.
Oh, wow.
It was just like a ton of giant to do. But yeah, it's a trip. I mean, I got one from my mom.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's a pretty neat thing to have. I mean, it's surreal because the song is, I don't know, it's like it's so big that it's like it's weird. It feels like outsized for like me as a human. It's like people use it for things like in my head it's about like a breakup, but art is subjective, and so it's just about whatever you want it to be about. And so like I met a couple the other day in Chicago that used it as their wedding song, and that's like a
Wow.
beautiful part about art. It's like it's subjective. So if you hear it and you are like, this reminds me of my grandma, well then it's about your grandma. Like for you, it is irrelevant what your neighbor thinks the song is about, and it is also irrelevant what I think the song is about, even if I made it. It's there's like, I don't think the art's not like I hate to air quote, I know this is a podcast, but art is not about
Uh-huh.
anything. It's like, regardless of my intentions, it has to do with how you perceive it. And so that's a pretty fascinating part about creating stuff. But anyway, yeah, the song it's crazy how big it is. I struggle to understand it. It is staggering. Every once in a while, I have to do some crazy giant thing that involves the song, and I'm always like, "How are we still doing this? How is this still happening?"
It's amazing. The video is so cool. Just you going in with the two plaques and presenting
Yeah,
them to your friend.
yeah,
I
no,
thought that was really rad.
yep. And they're just like up in his house, like just like you go in there and they're just like next to like a picture of his mom, and like
Yeah.
all of us in college in our band, and then there's just a giant platinum plaque on the wall. It's
It's funny you go, sorry, your picture, you kind of make a joke about how your picture's on it, but his
yeah,
picture isn't on
no,
it.
it is, I don't know, it's something else though. The whole thing is nuts. And so yeah, we're very lucky. It's been wild. And I think that also because for many artists that have a song that like I don't know, becomes ubiquitous in that way, it's like easy to get to lose the artist in it. But I've found that like for me it's been like a gateway drug, rather than like people hear that song and then they stop, they come in and they listen to lots of stuff. And
Hmm.
so that's been an incredible blessing for me. I have this enormous catalog. I've been making records for 20 years, so people come in and they hear that, or they hear one of the other very popular ones, and then they stick around. And that's been a you know a pretty a pretty significant part of how my music has spread these last whatever 20 years.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Like, because we were talking about earlier, like having the one hit or one song that you TikTok followers or whatever. It's like some people might go to that page, and if there's no back catalog, then it's like, oh, okay, well, there's this one
Yeah,
song. But you have obviously a ton of other
lots.
songs and big songs that, um, yeah, over the years that you've been working at this. I want to talk to you about this album that's coming out. I think about a week or so on the
Hmm.
second, Inside Voices. I know that there's a lot of, you know, well, you guys went through a lot, you and your wife, around this time period, and you ended up going. Well, you can tell me the story, but you went to like Long Island to write the record.
So I recorded the record on Long Island.
Oh,
So
okay.
Yeah. So what happened is, um, a few years ago, my wife had a miscarriage, and then a few months after that, was pregnant again, and it turned out to be an ectopic pregnancy, and it was a especially dangerous, like life-threatening situation. She needed to have surgery, and it was emergency surgery. It was terrifying, and after that, we were not in a good place. It was emotionally horrible. The pregnancy loss involves the death of a dream. The idea that you're going to have these children walking around, that they don't exist, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
And we were really struggling for a long time, and at some point we decided to go with Paul Hammer, who is my collaborative, I mean, my music partner. I work on all kinds of stuff with Paul, and his wife Faitha. We decided we would all go together to the beach, and while we were there, we just wanted to go to try to do something normal, and feel like we were doing something regular. And so we went to the beach, and while we were there, we started to feel a lot better. Just like a lot of the time that we were there, and we'd laugh, and we were like making dinner together, just doing regular stuff, sitting outside, having a glass of wine, telling stories. And so I said to Paul, I really wanted to give my wife that, like, as for as long as I could. And I said, maybe when it's time to make a new record, we should go to the beach and we should see if we could just make it in a house. We had made house records before, but never just the two of us alone. So I
Mhm.
was like, well, for us to be able to do this, um, probably the bulk of the recording budget we're going to need for a place to stay, because it's, obviously expensive to stay by the beach. And so we'll probably need to mostly make this just you and I. And so he was into it, and I pitched it to my wife, and uh, she was just concerned that I hadn't written a song like in a very long time, because we had been doing all this, real stuff, like actual life stuff, and I wasn't writing at all. So as kind of proof of concept, I sat down and I wrote a song called Body Language. Paul's wife is from Brazil, and my wife, like I said, is from Georgia, and I don't know, we each grew up far away from our wives. I mean, I eventually moved to Georgia, but like, our childhoods are pretty different, hers and mine. And certainly Paul and his wife's were. He's from upstate New York, like I said, and she's from Brazil. And so just like watching them and seeing how lucky we were to have found these people who had we had these very deep understandings with, I think it's a miracle to find that, but especially with someone who, like, all the circumstances that had to align for us to find these particular women was like, miracles. And there they were, just swirling around us, as we were making dinner and telling stories and drinking wine and sharing all these things. And I was so grateful, and so I wrote Body Language about that understanding. And I played it for her, and she was like, oh, okay, you still know how to write songs, okay, good. We didn't, it's not turned off, it's not broken.
Mhm.
And so we set out to start making plans to record the following summer, at the beach. And so we found a house on the North Fork of Long Island, which Long Island is shaped like a lobster claw, for those of you that don't know. And the bottom part is the South Fork, like where the Hamptons are. And the
Mhm.
North Fork is the other part of the lobster claw. Um, so we were facing a bay, that faces the Hamptons, and it's called Peconic Bay. And we went to this little town called Laurel, on the North Fork, and we just moved into this house, and I just didn't feel like I could, in good conscience, leave my family at this like wildly difficult time in our lives. Usually when we make records, it's like we wake up in the morning, we eat breakfast, we go to the studio, and then we stay until we're like ready to fall asleep, and then we go home and go to sleep. And usually we, creep into our houses long after everyone else is asleep, and we do that kind of every single day indefinitely until we finish. And my family wasn't in a place where I could do that. And so this
Mhm.
allowed us, we just took a bedroom in the house. We brought our gear in there, and we worked in there. And, my daughter was, she was, 3 years old at that point. She'd be taking her nap down the hall, or, outside flying a kite by the water with Paul's wife. And, my wife was working in the other room, and Paul's wife is an artist. So, she was doing like cool art stuff, like making these crazy, multimedia kind of things, using things that she was finding as they were out on their adventures. Like,
Oh, that's
it was
rad.
really it was really nice for us to just be there, and participate in the lives of our families every day. And I mean, honestly, I wrote this music in the wake of my wife nearly losing her life. And so it's this sort of love letter to her. And I don't I don't think I could have done that in another way. Like being able to like be in this house with the family and with one of my best friends making the music. It's just like, first of all, there were less people's input. In the studio, a lot of times there's like somebody sitting in the back and they're pissed off because they're there to play keyboard and you're not putting keyboard on this song. You're like managing people. And so there was
Right.
none of that. And so I was really able to like tend my own emotions were still so raw surrounding this that I really was able to just, sit there with my friend and work through this stuff. And it was hard. I don't, I don't know that I've ever been involved in a process where we were making a record that was more emotional. I mean, I had planned a whole life with this woman. She is my partner in everything. She's
Mhm.
my great love, the mother of my child, my business partner. Like literally every part of our lives are intertwined. And then I nearly lost her, and it was difficult for me to explain how I felt. And I find that, for me, it's easier to write songs sometimes than it is to talk about my feelings.
Mhm.
And so that's what the music was born from. And so, if nothing else, this whole process definitely taught me to pay very close attention. And Because our time is short. And then in the midst of all this, my grandparents died. They died 8 days apart,
Oh my
which
gosh.
was, yeah, it was, it was heartbreaking, but it was also very, very beautiful. My grandmother wasn't sick. She just went to bed one night, a week after my grandfather died, and she did not wake up. And they had been together for more than 60 years. So it was just a reminder that even if you get to, they were together 60, 61, 62 years, from when they started dating. And even
Mhm.
if you get 60 years together, eventually your time runs out and it never feels like enough. I watched her that week devastated, because the organizing principle in her life was her relationship with that man.
Mhm.
They were partners, in everything, and they were best friends. And so I don't know, it was very difficult, but it did reinforce for me how valuable the thing is that I have. Like I have found this person who I value so much, who in addition to being somebody that I love, I like really respect her. I admire her. I feel very lucky to have found someone like a person of substance to
Mhm.
share my life with. And so I don't know, this whole process really reminded me of how blessed I am, how much I value my family. And so the record is about that, but it's also now made me reevaluate everything in my life. Like this tour, I went on the road for a little while, then I came
Mhm.
home. And then I'm like out in little fits and starts because I need to be here. Like you can't miss a month and just be gone and expect your family to just like be okay. Like that's not,
Right.
I think when I was starting, I used to go on the road sometimes, 300 days a year. There was a point even like up till I don't know, not so long ago, that like I've spent more days in Europe. One year, I forget which year it was. I spent more days in Europe than I spent in America, and I spent more days in. This is when I lived in New York. I spent more days in London than I did in New York over the course of the first like 10 months of the year because we just were ping ponging all like we'd go to Europe for however long, whatever, like just a little less than 3 months. And then we'd leave, we'd go on tour in the States. And then we go back to Europe, we go to Australia, and we just like, beep, 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 beep around the
Mhm.
world. Um, and while it's important to me to share my music with everyone, and I'm happy to be out there playing these shows, everything that I do now is much more targeted and focused because I need to be here. Like I'm somebody's dad and I'm somebody's husband. And I take all of that very seriously. And it's like, I love my art. I love to get to make this music and I love to get to share it with people. And I'm very appreciative of it, the opportunities that I have to do that. But, at the end of the day, like I think we lift up a lot of people in entertainment, especially men who are terrible fathers. Like people love to do that. They romanticize someone's love affair, and it's like the guy actually was a terrible husband. He, was not a good father, and like that's it's part of the legacy of a bunch of people. Nashville, where I live now, they love to do that, to lift up a person who's like a bad father, and they like forget all this stuff that he did, and they like make him into some kind of a saint. And I just feel like if
That's interesting.
I die,
That's where I live now. That's interesting that you said that.
if I were to die and someone were to say he wasn't a good father, that would be the worst thing that someone could say. Like, because your kids don't sign up to be born. Like you pick them, you pick to
Mhm.
have them, you pick to raise them, and so you have to take care of them. It's like the most important thing, because they didn't ask to be here. It's not their fault. Like if you have a hard day or your job is difficult or whatever, you owe it to your children to give them your absolute best. And I think that, even more so than your spouse. Like, I mean, I'm doing my best for my wife, of course, because she's my partner, but she picked me. But the kids don't pick you. You pick them. And so it feels like that's my most important job. It's like being someone's father, being someone's husband, and then I'll do all the rest of this stuff too. But those are so far ahead of everything else that uh, I don't know. Like, I don't know that. Like, I think that I would have been this serious about my relationship with my family probably if none of this stuff had happened. But it, I know for certain now how I feel, and it really reinforced how serious my commitment is to my wife and to my child. And so
I,
that's what Inside Voices is about. And some of it sounds more fun than this sounds. This is like sounds pretty heavy, but I mean, and a lot of it is just beautiful, beautiful music about this relationship that's been obviously kind of the biggest thing that in my life.
Mhm. I love that that you said all that about, being a dad first and a husband first. I mean, I have two kids, and you don't hear a lot of artists and a wife, and her and I created this podcast together, and it's cool. I'm hearing a lot of similarities in my story when you talk about, working with your wife and stuff. And I find it awesome that that you speak that way, because you don't hear a lot of artists come out and say what you just said about, family and your kids and your wife. I find that rare with artists in general. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
generalizing, like as far
uh,
as like just coming out and being like, I don't know. I don't know what
yeah,
the
I
hell
guess,
I'm saying.
I think we're taught, like, when you're somebody that people think is good at something in art, people give you an outsized amount of like adulation for that. It's like the guy who drove the bus on this tour was much better at driving a bus than I am at music. But nobody claps for him
Mhm.
when he like, backs the bus down a very narrow alley in an incredible way. Like, there's probably like 40 guys in America driving those tour buses that can do the things that this guy knows how to do. Like, there's a whole bunch of people that know how to do what I do, but in the arts they give you like an outsized amount of praise for knowing how to do it. And it's like, I don't know. Like, it's not that it's cool. Like, I love art, and it has given me everything that I have. And being a
Uh-huh.
musician is so important to me. But it's not that big of a deal. Like, I just think that people like let it go to their heads that like people cheer for you at your job, and like that's cool. But somebody's doing brain surgery, and like somebody else is like a structural engineer that can make sure that bridges don't fall down. It's like you're singing fucking songs, man. Like, take a deep breath. Like,
Right, right.
I mean, like, and I know a lot of people who are wildly talented that are not commercially successful. So it's like some of this stuff is a crapshoot. It's like,
Mhm.
and one of the worst things that I think you can do as an artist is allow it to get in your head that you deserve something. Like, you don't deserve, as an artist, you can work very, very hard. You can be very, very good, and nothing can happen commercially. Like, you don't deserve anything. as an artist. You can make stuff that you believe in and put it out into the world and work very hard, and nothing could happen commercially. And that's okay. It sucks. Obviously for me, it would be really bad because I don't know how to do anything else, like I said. But it's like nobody is owed a hit on the radio or another, whatever, like your next song performing as well as your last song or anything like that. It's like, you know, y for me, like I've been making records for 20 years. Like I said, we started the first record with the District was like Christmas break 2003. So I was writing the first District album 20 years ago. And like I've been doing this, my whole adult life. It has been, the main thing that I have done with my energy. And I've just watched so many people like be so entitled, and like I just think it's bullshit. It's just like you write songs, man, or like whatever. You're an actor. It's like, and the people that you meet that have had long and storied careers, like I wrote a song with Michael Bolton, and he is the coolest, nicest,
That's
most
amazing.
chill. He's so chill. Like you would never imagine, like if you didn't know who he was or he didn't open his mouth and be Michael Bolton, you would just be like, oh, like that's just like a chill, nice guy. He's nice to everyone he encounters. He's like easy to get along with. And you meet like a kid who's got a, whatever, like a 2 million followers on TikTok or something, who's like, like floats into the room the whatever, like the everybody should like,
Yeah.
freak out that they're there. And it's like, well, you know, that this none of this means anything. Like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Like you're not, because you're probably not going to be like Sam Cooke or Bob Dylan or something like influencing culture. Like it,
Right.
like I wrote a giant song. I didn't write Change Is Gonna Come. Like that's like I didn't write Fortunate Son or something. I'm not like standing behind, like some leaders trying to change the world. It's like you're making up songs about whatever your feelings or dancing or whatever you want to write music about. And like I get that it's important to people. Music, like I said, like when I was a kid, certainly, and I felt like isolated and confused and all of that, music made me feel much less alone and much more connected to others. And it was so important. And it still is so important to me for that. And as an artist, like putting music out into the world has allowed me to reach like countless millions and millions and millions of people that I never would, personally be able to interact with. And so that's great. I just think like, perspective, it's, I don't know, it's not more important than someone else's job. It doesn't make you so special that like you should be a dick or you should be a bad father. Like you don't get a pass for that. It's not cute that you're not taking care of your kids. It's not cool if you
Mhm.
do that. So that's my
Yeah.
opinion. That is how I feel about that.
I love that. Well, I appreciate your time, Ron. Thank you so much. I have a couple more questions real quick. I just want to know, like, was it therapeutic to you or healing? I mean, it sounds like having your family around you and writing that record and being there with just a good friend of yours. Did you feel like you had some healing from that experience and then getting the album finished?
It's an interesting thing. Like, I always say this, that we exist at the intersection of art and commerce. And so it was really fascinating, I wrote like probably like over the course of the time as we were prepping to make this album, I wrote probably 75 songs.
Wow, that's
And
a lot of songs.
and yeah, and that was really helpful for me from like August August going into September of one year to like the end of May the next year. Um, and that was really, really incredibly helpful for me. It allowed me to explore not just all of my feelings about this, but just any idea that was rattling around in my head, any melody that I was interested in. It allowed me to really immerse myself in my work while also exploring my feelings. So that was super helpful. And then trying to take all of these things and make them into recordings that like people might like, that was a really interesting intellectual challenge, because obviously like some of this is this like wildly therapeutic music about my like abiding love for my wife who I nearly lost. And
Mhm.
so that was a really interesting challenge, uh from a creative standpoint. And I don't know if that helped me feel better because it was like I was like, okay, so I had to make this for myself. Now, how do I make it into something that people can listen to?
Oh, for
Um,
yeah.
and so that was a really interesting part of the journey. But I would say yes, like us being in this house, being with our families, and just doing like regular stuff. Sometimes we'd like take a break and we go and we like drink a cup of coffee and we'd be sitting in the dining room, and we would literally see like Paul's wife and my daughter would float by, like sharing an inner tube. They would like, because you could see the bay. It was like
Oh, cool.
outside, so you could see they'd float into view outside, or like we could go outside and fly a kite with them, or do just something normal. Like we'd make dinner together and sit out on the deck and eat, and it was just it was very easy. Whereas like the work was hard, but the personal stuff was much easier. Whereas in the studio, it's like you're trying to sneak off for 5 minutes to call your wife while you slam some Thai food and then run back inside and cut another guitar part because you're paying, whatever, hundreds or
Hourly
thousands
fee.
of
Yeah.
dollars a day for the studio, plus all the people that are in there. And this was just like, just us and our family. So although the work was very hard because it was just the two of us, it felt different. I would say it felt different than anything we've done before. And so in the end, the overall experience was the most positive recording experience I've ever had, and it did help me to that, and a bunch of therapy helped me to emerge from all of these very difficult things that happened in my life.
Yeah. You said the first one that you wrote and kind of showed your wife, like, see, I can still write songs with body language, and that made the records the first song on the
Yeah.
record. Was it hard then? I mean, to write 75 songs, was it hard to, dwindle it down to the 10? And that's pretty amazing that that first one that you did kind of as, I mean, obviously you wrote the song for a reason, but it was like, see, I can still write. That makes the album.
you know um I have a tendency to do that. Like in the beginning stages of writing an album, I'll hit on a few good ones. Like in the first, like the first, I don't know, 15 songs I write, maybe like four of them or five of them are good and they make the record. And then it's like a long stretch of garbage. Like I think some, because for me it's like, although there's craft involved in this, like I know how to write songs, I learned how to, it's like my trade, I've learned to write songs. I would say that like some part of this is magic, and I do appreciate that it is. It's like some part of this is like requires fairy dust or something. It's like, because I could write a song every day, but like I don't write good songs all the time. Like most of the stuff that I write is like, it's like an idea that I'm trying to express, or or it's like an exercise. It's not like, it's not a good song. And so I was, while I wasn't so surprised that a handful of songs towards the beginning were good, um I yes, it is very difficult to get from there, from one song to 10 songs. Because in the end, even if you have nine finished, you still have to write one, like you have to pull something from the ether, like you have to reach into the clouds and, come down with a song that works. And so every time that happens, it feels like a miracle to me. Like The Real Thing. When I wrote The Real Thing, that pretty much automatically I was like, oh, this is one of them that's like going to go into my catalog and be something I play for the rest of my life. Like I kind of knew it immediately. And that doesn't happen every day. That doesn't happen to me every year. And so that there's a few on this record that were like that, where I was like, oh wow, like I've really channeled something powerful here. And but I also, this kind of goes back to the workshopping thing that I was talking about, where it's like I'm not so precious about it to be like some days I write stuff that's like, ah, all right, I tried that and it didn't work, or it's not good, and it's okay. And then tomorrow I try something else. So I'm not one of those people who's like, oh no, like this song isn't right and I've got to workshop it forever. Like if I write something and it's like a clunker, and I don't think I could workshop it into something of value, I just leave it and then I go on to the
Mhm.
next one. And so that's why my process is so long, I guess, is that like, I mean, I know some people can just sit down and write good songs every day, but that's not what I do here. So,
Well, you've wrote a lot of good songs, man. And I appreciate your time today, Ron. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've what my last question is going to be about advice, even though you've been giving so many amazing nuggets throughout this entire conversation. But if you have any for aspiring artists,
If you are meant to be a musician, there's nothing that I could say to you that will dissuade you from doing it. And if you're not meant to be a musician, there's nothing that I can tell you to help you. Like, just do your best and do it as long as it feels good. And if it doesn't feel good, if you can think of anything else that you wouldn't mind doing, go do that. And hopefully, you know, you get to do this, your whole life, and it's, rewarding. But it's okay if it isn't. It's okay if it isn't your full-time job. Like, you can make art because you love it, and just do it with whatever time you want to give to it. Like, there are no rules surrounding the creation of art, and it doesn't make your art better or worse if you have a day job, or if you're going to school, or whatever, if you just do it on the weekends, or if you only play guitar twice a month. Like, art is supposed to make you feel good. And so if it makes you feel good, then it's good. I feel this way about food. I feel this way about wine. It's like, I don't know anything about food or wine, but I know what I like. And so if you find something that makes you feel good in the arts, just make it, and don't make yourself crazy about it, because you can't control commercial outcomes. And so, don't worry about how many TikTok followers you get, or how many streams, or whatever, how much press you get. Just like, make make art to make art, and then do the best you can if you want to share it with people. And that's it.